So, it's officially August, and HBO Max just added a bunch of cool stuff, including 10 underrated movies that you've either overlooked or maybe saw and didn't really appreciate enough the first time. I'm going to talk about them and tell you why you should watch them or rewatch them. I've got 10 of my favorites ranked. We're gonna go through them, spending about a minute per movie, talking about why you should watch or rewatch these underrated gems. As usual, the full list of all the movies I talk about in this video is in the top pinned comment down below. And while all these movies were just recently added to HBO Max, they're not gonna stay around forever, so be sure you've clicked that subscribe button and the little bell icon. That way you get notifications when videos like this release so you don't miss out. But Black Death stars Sean Bean and several other Game of Thrones alumni. In fact, this movie came out around the middle of that series and has a lot in common with it production-wise, the costumes, the cast. But this movie does take place amongst the plague, yet there may be something else going on, something sort of supernatural. To me, this one was a slow burn and ultimately didn't deliver a lot by the end. But if you've been going through Game of Thrones withdrawals since the show ended, this could be a great way to scratch that itch. Freaky came out during the pandemic and is essentially the premise of Freaky Friday, except this one is a horror movie. Well, it's a horror comedy.
What's your favorite movie?
I tell people it's Eternal Sunshine, but it's Pitch Perfect too.
TV show?
Sabrina.
Favorite snack?
Triple Berry Gushers.
In this movie, Vince Vaughn actually plays a serial killer, but only for a little while because he swaps bodies with a teenage girl and she then becomes the killer. But then the rest of the movie, Vince Vaughn's body is possessed by a teenage girl. Not the newest, freshest, funniest concept ever, but still, it did work. Vince Vaughn did a really good job playing this teenage girl character, and then it was cool to see this girl in this red leather jacket going around killing people with a meat hook. So this movie really is a good balance, best of both worlds kind of thing. It was funny enough and was enough of a horror movie. It didn't do either of those two jobs great, but it did them good enough, and it was a fun watch during the pandemic. Now we're gonna go back in time a little bit with a heist movie starring Robert De Niro and Edward Norton with The Score. So in this movie, they're trying to steal like a rare object, and Robert De Niro plays like a career criminal, safecracker type guy. This one also is a bit of a slow burn. Most of the movie is planning the heist, and then when you actually do get to the heist, it is sort of a safe cracking type thing. It's not like Heat where they go in guns blazing into a bank, but still, Edward Norton plays a great character. Robert De Niro is kind of middle of the road Robert De Niro, but that's decent enough for this movie. But still, a decent little heist movie that's a lot more about the sneaky side of pulling off a heist than the action elements. But if action is what you're looking for, I happen to think Tango and Cash is a severely underrated movie.
You blew it big time, pal. This asshole's out of control and I can't stop him. But I'm not going down for this, Tango. I mean it. You're on your own. I'm out of here. Don't forget the right. You want my vote for the Psycho Hall of Fame, asshole? You got it.
This stars Sylvester Stallone and Kurt Russell, one of my absolute favorite actors of all time, and it is a funny, wild action movie. It is incredibly silly, incredibly stupid, but it does sort of pair along with movies like Lethal Weapon. I happen to think Lethal Weapon is much better. It's got a harder edge to it. Tango and Cash is sillier and cheesier, but that's also kind of what I like about it. When they decide to go ham with this movie, they really go all in, and you just have to have fun with this one. If you take this one seriously, you're gonna be bummed out, and if you don't, it could be a lot of fun to watch. And then we'll round out my bottom 5 on this list with something very, very similar that's an action comedy that I think is one of the most underrated of all time, The Last Action Hero. Now, let me reiterate, I said most underrated, I didn't say best, but this is an incredibly good action movie where every single piece of action is not only a big stunt that was done for real, it's also all hilarious. As you watch or rewatch this movie, you may notice it's got a very good look to it. High production value, lens flares, it just looks like a real genuine action movie. And that's because it was actually directed by John McTiernan. Now, if that name doesn't sound familiar, he is most famous for having directed Predator and Die Hard. Easily two of the best action movies ever made, easily in the top 10 of all time. And while Last Action Hero isn't nearly as good, it does have a lot of the same qualities that I think elevate it beyond your typical spoof movie. Everybody that gets shot, every explosion, every monster truck bursting onto the scene is a joke in this movie, and they're all really well done. In fact, when I was a kid and I saw this, I didn't get it at all. It took years and years of watching action movies to understand how packed this movie is with jokes. If you watch it and don't really get it either, it's because you don't watch enough action movies.
It's not my son.
Well, I'm sure you're mistaken.
I'm not mistaken.
Well, he's been through 5 terrible long months. He's lost weight. He's changed.
I would know my own son.
All I'm saying is you're in shock and he's changed.
Now, there are a couple of movies that go by the name The Changeling, but I'm talking about the Clint Eastwood directed Angelina Jolie, The Changeling. This is a weird movie, but it's so well done and so underappreciated I wanted to talk about it. This is the true story of a woman whose child went missing and was brought back, yet she starts to believe that he's a different person. It's creepy stuff, but not in the way that you would think. Very well directed by Clint Eastwood. That's kind of what makes this one work, because you do have to be patient. The nature of the story requires you to be patient with this one. If you can be, not only is this one just a good movie and very interesting, the fact that this really happened is just wild, wild stuff. So if that sounds like you, check it out. It's just a good quality drama, again, from director Clint Eastwood.
Come on, hey, here's another dead hooker in this trunk.
What?
Oh my goodness!
What are you doing?
I've never seen so many dead hookers in all my life.
Lord knows I have.
And then one of my favorite comedies of all time, or at least one of my favorite like underrated ones. You know what I mean? One that's not like Animal House, Caddyshack, one that gets a lot of credit with the public is Dirty Work. I also happen to think Norm Macdonald's one of the funniest human beings on the planet, and even though he's really dry and not a very good actor or anything in Dirty Work, it's all funny. It all delivers, all the jokes are funny. It's silly sort of teenager humor, but I've always had a soft spot in my heart for this movie. I love to see it on HBO Max. This movie's not for everybody. This movie is a little more in line with like Adam Sandler type movies, or at least older ones. So if you're not into that, Dirty Work may not really be the movie for you. But one that I do recommend for almost everybody is The Devil's Double. In this movie, Dominic Cooper plays one of Saddam Hussein's sons, but he also plays one of Saddam Hussein's sons' doubles, which is a real thing. This family used to have a bunch of doubles, that way in case they were assassinated, it was likely going to be somebody else. Not only is that whole world interesting, because it had a veil over it for so long, and not only is that interesting to see on film, but Dominic Cooper's performance as both of these characters is really wild and impressive, because not only is he playing two people, but one of those people is pretending to be the other person. And that does get a little tricky at times, and it works on film. This movie's got a beautiful look to it. It's got a surprising amount of action in it. They do embellish the story a bit, which is kind of a shame, but it also ends up making the movie more entertaining as a result. I dig the movie, I dig the soundtrack, I like a lot of things about it. If you generally do like my recommendations, I do strongly recommend The Devil's Double. And then my next pick I debated on putting on this list. It's my number 2 pick, it deserves to be there, but I'm not totally clear on how appreciated this movie is. But Michael Mann's Collateral, I think, is incredibly underrated. Now, there is some silly stuff you have to overlook, like the fact that this hitman, played by Tom Cruise, really didn't seem to have a plan when he came to LA. He just sort of fell ass backwards into this taxi driver, played by Jamie Foxx, that would drive him around all night. But that's the premise, and the setup does allow for some very interesting sequences. I really dig this movie. I especially love the look of it. Michael Mann did this at a time when digital cameras were just starting to be used in big budget movies, and this movie does have a mix of film and digital, and at the time that it was released, it looked way cooler than anything else, and it still does hold up. But a lot of other movies have imitated it since, or at least have used the same technology and achieved the same look. But because it was such a unique experience the first time I saw it, I watched this movie over and over a bunch of times, and it still does make for a great hitman flick. Now, my number 1 pick on this list is going to require some explanation, because most of these are for pretty broad audiences, but longtime subscribers know that my favorite director of all time is Martin Scorsese. One of my favorite movies of his that I think is one of his most underrated, again, with the public at large is Mean Streets.
I'm a mook, yeah. What's a mook?
A mook? What's a mook? I don't know. What's a mook?
You can't call me a mook.
I can't?
No.
Now, not only was this one of his first movies, it was also one of Robert De Niro's first performances, and it's got a packed cast with a lot of faces you're going to recognize, including Harvey Keitel, who's really the lead role in this movie. Now, the caveat I have to give you is that, like most Martin Scorsese movies, this movie does not really have a plot, and it can meander a bit, yet a lot of people consider it to be a masterpiece. It really does capture this moment in New York City, this neighborhood in New York City, these characters really well. If you've liked movies specifically like Goodfellas, Casino, then I highly recommend you go check out Mean Streets. It's in a similar vein, it goes with those movies. It is very dated, it's got this 70s vibe, but it's been remastered, it looks crisp, and it just captures, again, the moment really well. Again, some fantastic, really entertaining scenes. A personal favorite of mine is the fight at the pool hall, but that is the list. Let me know what you plan on watching in the comments down below. Also, help me thank the Patreon supporters. They've been a great source of support for the channel for a very long time. If you are interested in becoming a Patreon supporter, there's a link in the description below. There's also a link down there where you can become a channel member and get access to exclusive videos right here on YouTube. But I will keep making these videos as long as you keep watching them. Thanks for checking out this special HBO Max episode, and you will see me on the next one.